Hey guys, Manic Mercurian here, back once again with another birth chart reading. This one is for Saturday, February 22nd, 1997 at 12:24 a.m. in Hurricane, Utah. And this person, you have Sun in Pisces, Moon in Virgo with Scorpio rising. And first thing I noticed is that, you're one of these charts that you do have Pisces Sun, but you have no other planets in Pisces whatsoever, which is unusual. Most people will have, at least Mercury in the same sign as their Sun, sometimes Venus or maybe another planet. So for you, you really wouldn't relate a lot to Pisces. Now you do have Scorpio rising, which is a little bit similar, but still, you're actually pretty lacking of water in your chart other than the Sun. So typically Pisces Sun people would be very emotional, very sensitive. They would be, they would lack structure. Um, they would. It's almost like they have no barrier between themselves and their surroundings. So they're constantly taking everything in, especially emotionally or intuitively, and they're also almost like bleeding outward, or it's like they melt with their surroundings, kind of, and it makes them very adaptable. But they're generally very sensitive, very emotional people, very creative and artistic people. So that's typically what Pisces is. You would not really fit that archetype though. And the reason being is because you have Moon in Virgo, which is very different, and you have a huge stellium in Aquarius. So you have Uranus, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus in Aquarius. And Mercury and Venus in particular are inner planets, so they indicate much of the core of your personality. And being an Aquarius, which is a dramatically different sign than Pisces, especially combining with your Virgo moon, to me paints a completely different picture. So I wouldn't describe you as being super emotional or unstructured. What I would describe you as is, moon and Virgo. So you would be very intellectual, very logical, very cerebral, especially when it comes to your emotions. You almost have a brain where most people would have a heart. So you're constantly thinking everything out, you're analyzing, and especially when something comes up that would typically make someone else very emotional, it's almost like your brain would just kick on, and so you'd want to figure it out, analyze it. You would intellectualize your emotions basically. So you'd want to analyze and understand and control your own emotions, your own feelings or sensitivities. You would be very sensitive, but it's in a very different way. I don't see you as being overtly emotional whatsoever. I think you'd actually be, um, you would actually seem pretty emotionless to other people. Now, you of course are not emotionless. It's just that your emotions are more subtle than perhaps most people. And again, this is very unusual for Pisces Sun, which is typically, very overtly emotional. You would not be this way at all. And it's just because, so going back to the Virgo Moon is very sensitive, but again, it sort of combats this or remedies this sensitivity with its intellect and its ability to analyze. So you would be a very sensitive person, but you control this and protect yourself with your analytical ability. Now going to your Aquarius planets, Mercury in astrology rules kind of how you think. It's like your intellect and your mind, how you think and communicate as well. Being an Aquarius, it would make you a lot more detached emotionally. So it would make you more objective. So you like to just look at things in a quote unquote objective way. I mean, we can debate on if objectivity actually exists because really everything is kind of subjective still. But what I mean by this is that, like, you want to look at just the facts of the situation. So you're very good at detaching yourself from your situation or from whatever you're analyzing, and looking at something from almost like an outsider's perspective. And you have this like cold reasoning. Like you can just look at the facts in an unfeeling way to get a very I guess objective or usually very accurate idea of whatever you're analyzing. So I do see you as being very analytical, very logical, maybe even seemingly cold at times. And again, this is all very, very different from Pisces Sun. I would almost discourage you from even reading Pisces. You know, like if you go online and you Google Pisces Sun characteristics, um, they would be true for you on some level, but I don't think you would generally relate to most of them, because again, you just have a lot of contrary aspects in your astrology. Okay, one thing I want to explain. So to me, you're more Aquarius and Virgo than anything. You have so many planets in Aquarius, but then you have Moon in Virgo, which is very important. I think the Moon is equally as important to the Sun, sometimes more important. And for you, the Moon is in a very prominent place. Your Sun is in the fourth house, so it's hidden away. This indicates that your father may have been absent for a lot of your upbringing. Um, and it also indicates that you feel more comfortable at home. It can be like a homebody sometimes. However, you have Moon in a very prominent place. When you were born, the only planets that were visible were Mars and the Moon. I know the Moon is technically not a planet, but in astrology we sometimes call it a planet. But for you, the Moon was in a very prominent place. It was at the top of the ecliptic, or about as high as it gets in the sky, basically. So in astrology, this would indicate that your emotions are very, or um, let me rephrase that. It would indicate that your core personality or your interior is very visible to people. Now, this is sort of unusual because the sun was not visible at all. You were born actually right on a full moon. I'm just noticing. So the moon is very dominant, and typically the moon would show the more emotional side of a person. But again, for you, the emotional side, or what would usually be the emotional side of your personality, is actually very logical. So you would have this kind of Virgoan side of your personality that's very visible. Again, that would mean that you're very analytical, detail oriented, very practical. You are adaptable, but in a way that's very, it's what you view as objective, because you're looking at all these facts and observations and coming up with a conclusion from there. So it's very logical, it's very analytical, very intellectual. But what I'm saying is this side of your personality is very visible to people, basically. So this would make it easy for people to kind of understand you, at least on some level. I think you'd be very good at explaining yourself because of your sort of superior intellect and analytical ability. I think you'd be good at writing or speaking, because you speak in a way that is concise. I think you'd be very confident in your analytical ability, because again, your opinions and views on things are what you view as objective. Now, the objectivity again is kind of an interesting concept, because Virgos always think that they're objective, myself included. And, on some level they are, but it's funny when you get multiple Virgos in one group, because they'll all think that they're being objective, but they'll all do so in very different ways. So you are objective, but again, it's objective for you. It's objective based on your personal experience and the facts and observations that you yourself have personally had access to, or come across yourself. Okay, I keep getting distracted, but one thing I want to talk about is, so I was saying that the two signs to me that you would most resonate with would be Virgo and Aquarius. And because of that, there are some themes. So these are two very different signs, but there are a lot of themes that they share at the same time. One is that they are very sensitive and compassionate, but they sort of mask this with their objective realism and their, they're both kind of, they both appear very detached, very objective, very like logical, very removed from their emotions. But they have this theme of helping others. Both Virgo and Aquarius are often represented by angels in astrology. So this to me indicates that they involve themes of helping other people, basically. So I think it's a major part of your astrology to help other people with your intellect, or with your ability to analyze, with your ability to have a quote unquote objective point of view. Um, or I don't know, something logical, something, something where you're managing information, or you're analyzing maybe complex systems. I think that you're meant to help other people through something of that nature, some kind of an analytical, something where you're handling a lot of information, or communicating information, something very informational, I guess, is the bottom line. But you're very much meant to help people. And again, this is sort of, I think people might not realize this with you, because you come across as being sometimes cold or detached or unfeeling of other people. People might think that you are not very empathetic, that you maybe don't care about other people's feelings. And I don't think this is the case. I think it's just, like I said, that you're like for instance, you wouldn't be a big sympathy person, you'd be a big empathy person. You want to just fix the problem. You're not someone who is going to be a good like shoulder to cry on, for instance. You want to actually just solve whatever the problem is. And so you're very logical in that sense. You're very you want to help, but not in a way that is, emotionally nurturing or just, like you would probably hate pity or hate people being overly emotional. For you, it's very logical. If there's a problem, you want to fix it. And again, this is a huge theme for you. I think you're meant to help other people, solve their problems through the objective realism that you have and through your ability to handle large amounts of information. Okay, I just kind of swept through most of the basic parts of your personality that I want to talk about, but let's talk about. We could go in a couple directions here. Okay. So let's talk about Saturn, and then that'll be a good segue into your Mars. So you have Saturn in Aries, and this, of course, so Saturn's very slow. So anyone born around the same year or two as yourself would have Saturn in Aries. So this is a little bit more general, but it would indicate that people around your age would be very hard on themselves, especially early on in life. Saturn in Aries, it'd mean that you have very high standards for yourself. And I think combining this with Aquarius and Virgo, and Scorpio rising, all these kind of placements in your chart reinforce this concept that you're very hard on yourself. You set high standards for yourself, and this is especially difficult early on in life. So you may have like low self-esteem. You may feel like you're not good enough, or you may feel a lot of pressure. And I think sometimes you might not even realize that you're putting this pressure on yourself. You may perceive it as coming from the outside, but really you're your own, worst critic. You're holding yourself to an extremely high standard, and it's something that's very difficult to adjust to early in life. I think it would take at least 20 something years. So, um, I guess you're in your mid 20s now, so you're probably about to make a lot of progress in this area. I always say we usually we make a lot of progress with Saturn's themes in our very late 20s with our first Saturn return. So once you are 28, 29, 30, you will very much, most likely, of course, you have free will, but the main trajectory would be that you will step up to the plate in terms of living up to these high standards that you set for yourself. And this is kind of what you're meant to do, that you may feel like you're not good enough, that you may feel this overwhelming weight early on, but eventually it's something that you learn to live with and that you rise up to the challenge of. And so this is a very strong placement, especially later in life. It is initially very challenging. Saturn's in fall here, which means that it's almost like it's debilitated. It's very difficult. But with Saturn, this is typically how Saturn works, though, where it's very challenging initially. You may feel like you're not good at these things. You're not good at having a solid identity or, feeling confident initially on. But later, you'll become extra good at these things. Once you rise to the challenge and, kind of sit with this energy, it takes a lot of time. But especially as you get into your 30s, you'll become more confident, more outgoing, and again, this is assuming that you rise up to the challenge, but that's the main probability that I would see. Especially combining this with your Virgo Moon and your Aquarius placements, like I said earlier, you're a problem solver. You want to fix things. You want to fix yourself. You want to fix other people. You want to fix situations. And there's pros and cons of that. I think sometimes that could get you into trouble where they say no good deed goes unpunished. So sometimes you can involve yourself in situations that become troublesome, and people might even blame you for your involvement, but really you're just trying to help. um, but anyway, so my point is that you would want to improve on things, and so I think this gives you a good setup to rise up to the challenge of your own self-expression and feeling comfortable with yourself. So this is something you'll naturally improve on and really you'll eventually become almost like a role model for that healthy self-esteem and that confidence and that self-expression later in life, especially once you get into your 30s. Now, okay, there is an interesting aspect. So you have Saturn at 5 degrees Aries. Mars is completely opposite at 4 degrees Libra, and it's retrograde. So basically, you have Mars opposing Saturn. And So your Mars is in a very difficult place here. Actually, both these are interesting because Saturn is in fall in Aries, so that's a very hard placement, and then Mars is in detriment in Libra, so that's also a very hard placement, and they're both opposing one another. This to me would indicate potential for violence or violent, not you being violent, but like I actually don't think you'd be very violent at all. Mars is typically how we fight, and it's our more aggressive side, more masculine or dominant side of our personality. It's also the more ambitious side, the more sexual side of our personality. And your Mars is in Libra, so it's in detriment. So it's the way your masculine, the masculine side of your personality is, would be sort of unconventional or unusual. It's not what people expect, and it's not outwardly aggressive. You would shy away from confrontation. You would not be aggressive. And early on in life, you actually might have a hard time even defending yourself because you just, again, you'd want to shy away from confrontation. If you are in a crisis or confrontational situation, you would react by becoming very logical. So you do not seem to me like someone who would panic whatsoever. And again, coming back to your Pisces Sun, pretty much everything I'm saying is completely contradictory from Pisces Sun because I don't know. You have a lot of very like cerebral placements in your chart, and Mars and Libra is one of them. So you'd react to a crisis situation by thinking things through. You wouldn't outwardly react in the moment. You'd want to plan and strategize, and then so this can be difficult because, like let's say someone confronts you with something, you may not even react until much later. So you have these like delayed reactions to things. And again, it's because you're wanting to take time to be logical and think it through and really process it before you come to a solution or come to a method on how you'll act or react. So this is good because you don't panic in situations. You keep your head. You think things through. You're logical, and You can give yourself that time to come up with a really good solution to whatever the problem is. This can be challenging though because other people may not understand you in times of crisis. So they may think that you are oblivious to the problem at hand because you're not reacting, or they may see you as being weak because you're not reacting, or also any situations that require immediate action, you may miss that opportunity because your reaction is to think it through first. So really, I describe this placement as being kind of like a superpower, but it's also a hindrance or a challenge, especially early on. It's just very different than how most people are. Most people, when confronted, they would react right away. They would just snap back or, almost act instinctively without thinking. And for you, it would be very, very opposite, very different. Okay, so that being said, this masculine side of your personality is. Oh, one last thing before I move on. Mars and Libra, again, like I said, it's the sexual side of your personality. It's in detriment, so this would indicate generally a low sex drive. And combining this with Virgo Moon and your Aquarius placements as well, um, I would see you as potentially having a little bit of a low sex drive. For you, your sexuality would be very intellectual, so you would be intellectually attracted to someone. You want someone uh, who you can respect. You want someone smart or intelligent, someone wise. That would turn you on. Someone who um, has that. It would be an intellectual attraction, I guess, is what I'm saying, rather than physical or sexual in nature. Or I guess it would still be sexual, but I think you know what I'm saying. You wouldn't be so much based on physical appearance as you would. It'd be more mental for you. And I'll talk more about your compatibility and your attraction and stuff later. But what I'm trying to get to here is your Mars opposing Saturn. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so this indicates to me a potential for violence, violent accidents or incidents. Again, I don't see you as being the aggressor in these circumstances, but if certain transits aspect this and awaken this opposition, it would potentially result in violent accidents, or it could have to do with your dad maybe growing up because Saturn can sometimes represent the father, and opposing Mars, this, there could be either you had a father who was sometimes violent. I don't think it'd be consistent, but maybe periodically violent or just very aggressive. Or it could have been, a violent accident involving your father. Maybe he was hurt in some way or injured. I don't wish any of this on you whatsoever, but I see this probability there. Um, okay, I think I said enough about that. Let's go to your. Hold on, let me drink some water. I already touched a lot on your, sexuality. So let's go to romance and, what you would be looking for in a mate or, compatibility. I think this area might be generally difficult for you just because you are so cerebral that people might not always sense that, emotion with you. So especially more emotional people would be hard. They would feel uncomfortable around you because they can't really place you emotionally. Um, they don't have that, they don't sense that feeling in you. And like I said earlier, it's not that you are an unemotional person. It's just your feelings are more subtle. You're more logical. Anyway, that being said, what you would look for in a mate would be would be indicated by your Mars, Venus, and Descendant most of all, is what I go to generally. So you have Mars in Libra, Venus in Aquarius, Descendant in Taurus. So Venus and Mars, they represent kind of, Venus is more feminine, Mars is more masculine. Venus is more about romance and your style with love and relationships. Mars is more sexual, the more sexual side of relationships. But they're both kind of the yin and the yang, or they're two sides of the same coin of how you go about things that you desire. And also, this definitely applies to, romantic and sexual matters. Now, they're both in air signs. Mars is in Libra again, Venus is in Aquarius. So they're both similar. So it would indicate that you'd be attracted to people with air in their charts. That would be Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius. And I think especially Aquarius because you have so many planets there, you would relate to people with Aquarius placements, maybe Aquarius Sun or just other planets in Aquarius. So what that would mean would be you'd be attracted to people who are kind of light, more detached, more analytical like yourself, more mentally oriented, someone quirky and really unique, someone kind of out there, different from everyone else. That would intrigue you. You want this level of uniqueness. Like you want someone kind of strange or unusual, someone with like interesting opinions, someone intellectual who you could have really rich conversations with or analytical conversations with. That would be very attractive to you, and even maybe sexually attractive. Like that kind of intellectual dynamic would be very attractive to you. So that's a huge thing, and this is mostly about what you're attracted to. It's not. It would be necessary for a long-term situation, but it doesn't always apply to long-term compatibility. So you may be very attracted to air signs, but that does not necessarily mean that they would be good for you in a long-term relationship. So hopefully I'm explaining that right. So you basically you would in a long-term situation, you would need someone with a little bit of air in their charts to be attracted to them. But just because someone has air in their charts and you're attracted to them doesn't mean that it's good for a long-term situation. For that long-term, what's really right for you and what will work, I would look more to the descendant, which is this little black arrow here. Whoops, sorry. So your descendant is in Taurus, ascendant is opposite that in Scorpio. So this would mean that you need someone reminiscent of Taurus in a long-term situation. So they could have placements in Taurus, like a Taurus sun might be good for you, or other earth signs as well. So that would be Taurus, but also Virgo and Capricorn. And Virgo in particular, you do have your moon there, so that your emotional core, the core of your personality, is in Virgo as well. So you would naturally get along with Earth and air signs the most. Air signs would be more of like an attractive thing, and you also think and speak like an Aquarius, so you are kind of naturally light and detached and eccentric in those areas. So you'd get along with air signs, but for really really long term compatibility, it'd be very important for them to be earthy. So that means they'd be pragmatic. They would be a little bit more heavy or dense. They'd be more practical. Someone very like sensual. Someone low key, easy going. Earth is the heaviest element, so we say that someone is very grounded, or they have their feet on the ground, or they're even, I think you could describe a person as being kind of earthy, like they're very practical or very sensual. Um, you definitely wouldn't want someone who gets carried away with their emotions, or who's like overly theatrical or dramatic. You wouldn't want someone who is like the center of attention and who's super like you wouldn't want necessarily a personality that's like super entertaining and like overly like loud or funny. You'd want someone more logical, definitely cerebral. I think that's the biggest thing. Someone who makes sense, who is very stable as well. Descendant and Taurus. Taurus is a very stable sign, it's fixed, so especially for long term situations, you would really need someone pragmatic and very stable and consistent. And this is partly because despite you being so logical and thinking things through, you can be a little bit tumultuous, especially in relationships. So, you would want someone else who's more the stable person, like a rock for you in a way. And you would be someone who's a little bit more eccentric or out there, more, I don't know, unique or complex, I guess. I think you wouldn't mind someone who's a little bit, how do I put this? Like easy to understand. Someone unique and eccentric and maybe a little bit weird, but also at the same time who is pragmatic and somewhat easy to understand. Um, the overall dynamic is you're attracted to Earth and air signs, so that means someone logical, someone cerebral, not someone overtly emotional. Okay, I think I've said enough about that. Okay, we've got most of this covered, I think. One interesting dynamic is that you have Scorpio rising, you have Pluto in the first house, and then you have Lilith conjunct the midheaven. All three of these placements to me would indicate that you would seem like your outward appearance to people and your first impression that you would give off would be, you would come across as very complex and very kind of fascinating. Like people people see you and they think that they can sense that there's something going on in your mind at all times that they're not fully accessing, and they would desire that. They would find that intriguing. They would find you as being kind of mysterious or complex. You would project power in a way, so people would see you as being kind of an authority figure, or um, they would see you as being alluring, or there's also kind of a sexual um, what's the word, influence or theme here. So people would see you as being someone kind of like sexy or cool or mysterious, or and I think you might think this is funny because this is very different than most of your personality. Most of your personality is not this way at all. It's very kind of more dry and logical and um, I don't know, knowledgeable or even like nerdy at times maybe. So it's very different than this outward appearance that you give off of being like very sexual and cool and mysterious, And I'm not saying that this isn't true. It's just kind of it's more on the outside of your personality, or it's more the vibe that you give off initially. This especially comes off like at work or in public. You seem, I don't know, like people might be very like sexually attracted to you, or they might have very polarizing feelings about you as well. So the same aspect would make people have, even when they don't know you very well, they would either really really like you and love you, or they would totally hate you. You are almost kind of polarizing in that way, and this can be really powerful. So this could be a good placement for having a strong public profile. Again, it's kind of hit and miss where some people would hate you, but they say any publicity is good publicity, and you would be noticeable, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you're almost noticeable because people feel like there's something going on covertly or under the surface with you, and it makes them intrigued. So anyway, that's just definitely a theme I've noticed. You also have your midheaven in Leo, so this would be great for also having a strong public profile because so midheaven would be kind of your career, but also your reputation. It's how you present yourself online, in public, at school or work. And being in Leo, it means you express yourself like a Leo in these circumstances. So you would kind of be the center of attention in a lot of aspects. People would see you as like a leader, or see you as being an authority figure. You would kind of make a splash in these areas. You'd be very noticeable. Um, so that's like really great. I mean, now that I'm kind of putting all these things together in my head, people do very much notice you, and I think you are meant to be an authority figure of some sort or a leader. And I think combining that with your this trait or this theme in your chart that you're meant to help people through your logic and your analysis, I think you have a great setup for being some kind of leader or authority figure where you can help others through the services you provide through the your information and intellect. You might initially come off as being cold or people might misunderstand you, but still it would at least get you noticed, and then from there, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say exactly. I don't know. I just basically I think you'd be a good authority figure. You'd be very noticeable. It would almost be a good dynamic for like a teacher or something where you're helping other people through your information. Let me just kind of look around and make sure I covered everything here. Um, okay, so being born with on a full moon, it would indicate that like you have these two very opposite sides of your personality, and so it can make um okay, so I think people might see you as being kind of stubborn because you are very like factual. You won't believe something unless it's like proven in your head. So people see you as being kind of stubborn and fixed, fixed or consistent. But at the same time, I think you yourself, you feel these like two very, or these multiple very different sides of your personality. So it's a lot to kind of deal with. It's a lot of contrast within yourself. And so it actually makes you very good at understanding different points of view. So you to me seem like someone who you do look at things from many different angles, and you look at things from other people's points of view, or other varying points of view. But you do so for a certain amount of time until you kind of integrate all of that information together, and then you arrive to one conclusion. And then once you arrive there, you're very fixated on that because you're very thorough in your analysis. And once you've gotten to that point, then you would be very stubborn, because you've ruled out any uh, irregularities or anything to disprove your point, I guess, or your stance. So that's kind of what I see. So hopefully I've explained that well enough where you are stubborn, but at the same time you have a personality that's very capable of understanding many different points of view. And then lastly, real quick, so the dynamic I just mentioned, a lot of it comes from your childhood, from your parents. That your chart to me indicates that your parents were very different from one another. They had different styles with parenting. They may have disagreed with each other a lot. Um, and the result is that you didn't really know what was expected of you from a young age. And that's initially challenging, but that's what eventually creates in you this dynamic of seeing multiple sides to situations because were kind of raised that way. You had to be that way as a child. Okay, I think I've covered almost everything. Oh, I haven't talked about the nodes yet. I'm just gonna talk about the nodes, and I think we're done here. But of course, if you have any questions at the end of this, I'd be happy to answer, or if you have anything specific you'd like more information about, definitely be happy to continue that conversation. But just to wrap up this reading, I'm going to talk about the nodes. So you have South Node at 28 degrees Pisces, so pretty much at the end of Pisces, North Node in Virgo. So this would indicate someone who has tendencies for escapism, especially at a young age. Um, I think you're a very thoughtful person. You're very like intelligent, as I've said before. But I think you have this tendency of getting lost in your own head, getting lost in these own worlds that you create in your head. And again, this would be especially be challenging at a young age. So I think you feel comfortable hiding away. You also have Sun in fourth house, which would reinforce this, and Scorpio rising. Okay, so this is definitely a theme here. So especially at a young age, you'd feel very comfortable just hiding away. So this might make you very introverted. People do notice you, and I think you're very noticeable, and you have that potential for being a leader. Especially later in life. But at the same time, there's part of you that wants to just kind of hide away and be alone. And it's because you're actually very sensitive. I don't think you seem emotionally sensitive to other people, and you might not even think so yourself, but from your chart, I would say that you are actually a very sensitive person. So especially at a young age, you may be tempted to just kind of hide away. I think you would enjoy, I don't know, staying by yourself and like researching different topics and learning as an astronomer rather than being an astronaut, for instance. So learning, from books or online, rather than being in the field experiencing something for yourself. I think you would like to just kind of hide away by yourself. You'd feel comfortable doing so, but eventually it would lead to your downfall. You're meant to become much more in the picture, much more hands-on. You're meant to have a strong reputation, and this is also backed by these other placements that I talked about earlier. And also, Pisces South Node is selfish, but it's not selfish in the sense that you are super overbearing and like stepping on other people's toes, like, or that you're, really dominantly being selfish with other people. The selfishness would come from how you remove yourself from the situation. It might not feel selfish in the moment, but it is because you abandon any commitments you have, or the connections you've made with other people. Checking out of this world through the escapist tendencies can be actually very selfish. So you're meant to well, first I should say you do have strengths that come from this. So you're good at being detached. You're good at removing yourself from the picture mentally, and I think that can be very useful and valuable when it comes to helping other people. And that's where you'll move into your North Node in Virgo, which is you can keep these themes of detachment, but apply them toward helping other people. You're meant to be helping other people through services. And again, this is a very informational thing, very logical thing. But you're meant to be in the picture. You're meant to have a strong reputation. North Node in 11th house is very public. And like I said, you have these other attributes that would make you have a strong reputation. So you're meant to maybe use your image to some extent, but especially use your informational abilities to help other people, and that's what you'll increasingly move toward later in life. You would especially make progress in this at the age of 9, maybe a little bit, but especially 18, 27, 36, and so on. Multiples of 9 with your age, you would make progress in learning to help other people and provide those services, because that would be very strong for your identity. I think you need the feeling of helping other people. And this might sound very contrary, because again, you don't always seem like you want to help people, but I think you really do. It's just through a more logical way, or informational way. Anyway, I'm kind of just repeating myself, but that's what I see with your chart. So of course, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to talk about, I'd be happy to talk about those. Oh, real quick, actually, before I let you go. So, okay, so going back to your Venus and Mars real quick, you have both of them are in air signs. So I think romantically you would have a hard time expressing yourself. It's especially because this is a more emotional realm. It's more having to do with attraction. And so this would be very difficult for you, because with you, you like to think through your problems, as I've stated before. And you like everything to be calculated and measured, and you really, that stance is good for most things, but it doesn't really apply to relationships. I mean, it can in some circumstances, I guess, but so when it comes to your attraction, you may not feel very confident in those areas. It's hard for you to express yourself, or you just don't know how to really express yourself in those areas. And I think that's unusual for you, because I think you're generally very capable of expressing yourself in a very clear way. But romantic dynamics would be a little bit difficult for you. But I think that's where you'd really click with someone else who is very kind of detached and cerebral like yourself as well, because they would understand you much more. They would understand that you aren't into overwhelming displays of emotion, that you're not a super gushy person by any means. So as long as you're with someone else who's kind of cerebral, that wouldn't be a problem, I don't think. I think you could understand one another. And then last thing here, Venus in Aquarius, it indicates you'd be kind of, like you'd be attracted to someone who is sort of conventional and modest and understated, but at the same time, someone a little bit quirky, or like they're kind of rebellious in an understated way, or in a, they're sort of covertly rebellious. They're subtly rebellious. I think that would be really attractive and fun for you. Anyway, that's what I see in your chart, so let me know what you think. And anyone else who's watching this, if you'd like a reading, email me at manic.mercurian@gmail.com. But thanks for this request. Very interesting chart. It was fun to read. And for everyone else, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.